When wealthy cattle baron Ezra Caldwell faces losing his entire empire, or watching the woman he loves face prison, he doesn't hesitate to reach for the pen. 6 months earlier, this same man discovered Dr. Clara Washington, a brilliant black physician, nearly frozen to death at a remote train station during a brutal Wyoming blizzard. Their partnership to fight a deadly diphtheria outbreak transformed into a forbidden love that now threatens to destroy them both in 1880s America, where interracial relationships could mean death. Ezra Caldwell built his fortune on taking calculated risks, but loving Clara Washington would become the most dangerous gamble of his life. The pen trembled in Ezra Caldwell's hand. 200 faces stared back from the town square, their breath forming clouds in the February cold. The sheriff held the paper steady against the wind. Clara Washington stood beside him, her dark coat pulled tight, her chin raised despite the hatred radiating from the crowd. The ultimatum was simple: sign over the cattle empire. Leave Wyoming, forever, or watch Clara face charges that would put her behind bars, maybe worse. Ezra's fingers closed around the pen. He had built this fortune on calculated risks, but loving Clara Washington had become the most dangerous gamble of his life. The ink touched paper. 6 months earlier, guilt followed Ezra Caldwell like his own shadow. It lived in the empty spaces of his ranch house. It whispered in the wind that swept across his 10,000 acres. It reminded him daily that good intentions could kill the people you loved most. His father had died because of an argument, because Ezra treated the Mexican ranch hands like human beings instead of tools, because he paid fair wages when other ranchers paid scraps. The old man had ridden out angry. The horse had thrown him against the rocks. 3 days later, they buried Jacob Caldwell in the family plot overlooking the valley he had carved from nothing. Now Ezra ran the most progressive ranch in Wyoming territory. His workers ate at tables instead of on the ground. Their children learned to read in the schoolhouse he built. Their wives received medical care when they gave birth. But success felt hollow when you believed yourself cursed. The blizzard came early that August morning. Snow fell sideways, driven by winds that could freeze a man solid in minutes. Most folks would have stayed inside. But Ezra had learned that isolation was its own kind of death. He rode out to check the line shacks. The cold bit through his coat, like teeth. Bitter Creek Station sat abandoned beside the defunct rail line. The building leaned against the wind like a drunk against a bar. Ezra almost rode past. Then he saw the smoke. Thin, gray, barely visible against the storm. He tied his horse to the broken hitching post. The door hung crooked on its hinges. Inside, a small fire burned in the rusted stove. A figure huddled beside it, wrapped in layers that might have once been a traveling coat. The person looked up. A woman. Dark skin. Eyes that held intelligence and wariness in equal measure. Don't need your help. Her voice carried education, strength, but her lips were blue with cold. Ezra stayed in the doorway. Didn't offer any yet. She pulled the coat tighter. White man finds colored woman alone in a storm. Always the same story. What story is that? The one where I'm supposed to be grateful? Snow swirled between them. The fire popped and hissed. How long you been here? She didn't answer. Train's not coming. Track's been dead 3 years. Still nothing. Ezra stepped back toward the door. I'll leave food and blankets outside. Take them or don't. Why? He turned back. Because you'll die if you don't. 20 minutes later, she emerged. The food was gone. The blankets remained. Pride, Ezra thought. He understood pride, but pride wouldn't keep her alive through the night. He made camp 50 yards away, close enough to help if she called, far enough to let her make her own choice. The storm lasted 3 days. On the morning of the 4th, she collapsed trying to gather firewood. Ezra found her face down in the snow. Her breathing came in shallow puffs. Her fingers had turned the color of old leather. This time she couldn't refuse. He carried her to his horse, wrapped her in his own coat, rode hard for the ranch house while she drifted in and out of consciousness. In her delirium, she spoke of medical school, of patients who needed her, of promises she had made to people whose names he didn't recognize. By the time they reached the ranch, Ezra understood two things. First, this woman was no ordinary traveler. Second, she was going to live. His housekeeper, Maria, took charge. Hot baths, warm food, clean clothes, the spare bedroom with windows, facing south to catch the morning sun. Clara Washington slept for 18 hours. When she woke, the fever had broken. Her eyes were clear. Her voice was steady. "I'm a doctor." Ezra sat, in the chair beside her bed. Figured as much. Not a nurse, a doctor. One of 12 colored women physicians in America. She waited for his reaction. Disbelief. Mockery. The usual responses. Territory could use a good doctor. Clara studied his face. "You don't seem surprised." "Nothing surprises me anymore." She told him the rest over the next 2 days. The Eastern abolitionists who funded her work, the mission to establish medical clinics throughout the West, the false papers she carried because towns wouldn't accept a colored doctor, and the sabotage, the systematic campaign that had followed her from Kansas to Colorado to Wyoming. Anonymous, threats, contaminated supplies, telegrams that redirected her to wrong destinations. Someone wanted her to fail. On her third day at the ranch, Clara discovered the locked room. She followed the sound of hammering to the east wing. The door stood open. Inside, wooden crates lined the walls. Medical equipment, surgical instruments, bottles of medicine that cost more than most men earned in a year. Ezra stood in the center of it all, assembling an examination table. "Planning to open your own practice?" He looked up. Sweat beaded his forehead despite the cool morning air. "Ordered it for Doc Patterson, before he died last spring." Clara walked between the crates. Her fingers traced the labels. "This equipment is worth a fortune. Money's not much good if there's no one to use it." She picked up a stethoscope. The metal gleamed like new silver. "You expect me to be grateful? I expect you to do whatever you think is right." But Clara had heard those words before. From men who wanted to control her work. From women who wanted to use her success for their own purposes. From communities that welcomed her skills but rejected her presence. She set the stethoscope back, in its case. "I'll be leaving tomorrow." That night, young Timothy Morrison rode hard from Millbrook. His horse was lathered with sweat. His face was pale with fear. "It's the children, Mr. Caldwell. They're dying." The diphtheria had come with the late summer heat. 3 children dead already. More sick every day. The white townspeople had no doctor, no medicine, no hope. Clara heard the conversation from the porch. She watched Timothy's horse stamp and snort in the yard. She felt the familiar pull of duty against the weight of principle. In the morning, she would have to choose. Save the children and compromise everything she believed about independence, or hold to her principles while innocence died. The choice would define everything that came after. Clara's medical bag sat heavy in her hands. The leather was worn, smooth from years of house calls in Philadelphia, in Baltimore, in a dozen towns that had welcomed her skills but never her presence. Millbrook spread below them like a collection of matchboxes. Smoke rose from a few chimneys, too few for a town of 300 souls. "They won't want me there." Ezra checked his horse's girth strap. His movements were careful, deliberate. "They want their children to live." The ride took 40 minutes, long enough for Clara to count the reasons this was a mistake, short enough that she couldn't change her mind. The first house they reached sat quiet as a grave, curtains drawn tight against the morning sun. A small wooden cross had been nailed to the front door. Too late for someone. Mayor Hutchins met them at the schoolhouse. His face was gray with exhaustion. His clothes hung loose like he'd forgotten to eat for days. "Doc Patterson's been dead. 4 months, we got nobody else." He looked at Clara. His jaw worked like he was chewing something bitter. "You really know medicine?" "Harvard Medical School, class of 1878. The words fell between them like stones in still water. Hutchins turned to Ezra. She your responsibility? She's her own responsibility. Clara stepped forward. Show me the sick children. The first house broke her heart. 3 children under 10, all burning with fever, their throats swollen shut. Their breathing came in short gasps that sounded like broken bellows. The mother hovering nearby was pale as winter sky. Her hands shook when she poured water from the pitcher. Can you help them? Clara knelt beside the smallest child, a girl, maybe 6 years old. Her pulse raced under Clara's fingers. Her skin felt hot enough to cook an egg. I need medicine. Antiseptic. Clean bandages. She looked up at Ezra. The supplies in your locked room. He nodded once. I'll have them here by tonight. The next house was worse. 2 children had already died. Their bodies lay covered with white sheets in the back bedroom. The father sat beside them like a statue carved from grief. Clara worked through the afternoon, house after house, family after family. The pattern never changed. Fever, swollen throat, the desperate eyes of parents watching their children fade. By evening, she had treated 18 children. Half might live if they got the right medicine. The other half would need miracles. Ezra returned as promised. A wagon loaded with medical supplies. Bottles of antiseptic that gleamed like liquid silver. Rolls of clean bandages. Medicines that could turn the tide if used quickly. Enough. They worked through the night. Clara administered treatments, Ezra carried supplies. Neither spoke about the looks they received from the townspeople. Some grateful, some suspicious. All desperate enough to accept help from anywhere. The pattern continued for 6 days. Clara treated patients. Ezra procured whatever she needed. Their movements became synchronized, efficient, like dancers who had practiced the same routine for years. On the 7th day, they saved Emma Hutchins. The mayor's youngest daughter had been closest to death. Her fever had spiked so high that her parents had already begun planning the funeral. But Clara's treatments worked. The swelling in her throat went down. Her breathing eased. Her fever broke just before dawn. Mayor Hutchins found Clara washing her hands at the town well. His eyes were red from crying. His voice was rough as sandpaper. Thank you. 2 words, but they carried the weight of a parent's gratitude. That night, Clara and Ezra shared coffee outside the schoolhouse. The first quiet moment they'd had in a week. Stars wheeled overhead like scattered diamonds. You saved them. Clara wrapped her hands around the tin cup. We saved them. Ezra looked at her across the small fire. Something had changed between them during the long nights of working together. A understanding that went deeper than words. You could stay. Set up practice here permanent. I have commitments. Other towns that need doctors. Other towns have doctors. This one has you. The fire popped and sent sparks spiraling into the darkness. Clara watched them rise and fade like tiny prayers. It's not that simple. But it was becoming that simple. The way he anticipated what she needed before she asked. The way she trusted his judgment about which families to visit first. The way they moved around each other in cramped sick rooms, without ever getting in each other's way. The attraction had grown quiet as morning frost, inevitable as sunrise. The first time their hands touched, it was while examining a patient. Clara was listening to a child's heartbeat. Ezra reached across to steady the boy's shoulder. Their fingers brushed. Neither pulled away. The second time was 3 days later. Clara was exhausted from a difficult delivery. Ezra caught her arm as she stumbled on the porch steps. His hand lingered a moment longer than necessary. She didn't mind. The third time was deliberate. They were cleaning medical instruments by lamplight. Clara reached for a scalpel at the same moment Ezra did. Instead of moving away, she let her palm rest against the back of his hand. They looked at each other across the table. The silence stretched taut as a bowstring. This is dangerous, Clara said. I know. For both of us. I know. But knowing didn't make it less real. didn't make the feeling smaller, didn't make the choice easier. On the 10th day, the supplies started arriving wrong. Clara had ordered laudanum for pain relief. The bottles contained water. She had requested carbolic acid for antiseptic. The shipment included wood stain that could have poisoned a patient. Someone was sabotaging her work. Clara confronted Ezra at his ranch that evening. Her anger was cold as winter wind. "You're controlling the supplies." "What?" "Making sure I need you. Making sure I can't work without your help." Ezra stood by the fireplace. His face was granite in the flickering light. "That's what you think of me?" "It's what men do. They help until the help becomes a leash." She turned to leave. Ezra's voice stopped her at the door. "Someone's been watching us." Clara's hand froze on the door handle. "Following us between the ranch and town, taking notes. I found torn papers near the creek yesterday." He pulled fragments from his pocket. Charred, edges, careful handwriting. Clara's name written in precise letters. "Someone's building a case against us." Clara took the papers. Her medical training had taught her to read evidence carefully. These fragments told a story of systematic observation. Someone was documenting their every interaction, every moment they spent together, every touch, every glance, building toward something that could destroy them both. Who? I don't know yet. Clara sank into the chair by the fire. The flames cast shifting shadows on the walls. "Maybe I should leave. Maybe you should fight." Outside, the wind picked up. It rattled the windows like someone trying to get in. Like whatever was coming for them had already found their trail. The burned papers in Clara's hands felt heavier than they should. Each fragment was a warning. Each word was a threat. Someone wanted her gone badly enough to plan for it. The question was who, and what they were willing to do to win. The saboteur had a face. Dr. Margaret Hayes arrived in Millbrook on a Tuesday morning. Her carriage was polished black. Her dress was Eastern-made. Her smile was sharp as a scalpel. She introduced herself to Mayor Hutchins as a concerned colleague. Someone who had heard about the diphtheria outbreak. Someone who wanted to help. Clara watched from the schoolhouse window. Something about the woman's posture felt wrong. Too careful. Too practiced. "You know her?" Ezra asked. "Never seen her before." But that wasn't entirely true. Clara had seen that type of smile in medical school, the expression women wore when they were measuring competition. Dr. Hayes made her rounds through town. She praised Clara's work to the families, complimented her technique to the mayor, asked detailed questions about treatment methods. All the while, her eyes were cataloging, recording, filing away information for later use. That evening, she appeared at Ezra's ranch, uninvited but not unwelcome. Maria served coffee in the front parlor. The conversation stayed polite as paint. "I've been following Dr. Washington's work across the territories." Hayes stirred sugar into her cup. Her movements were precise as clockwork. "Following how?" Clara asked. "Professional interest. There are so few women in medicine. Fewer still. Who are?" She paused delicately. "Pioneering new territories." The word hung in the air like smoke. Pioneers were praised in history books, but they were also the first to face arrows. "Dr. Washington has saved 18 children, Ezra said. "Remarkable, especially given the challenges she must face." Hayes turned to Clara. "I imagine some communities are more accepting than others." Clara set down her coffee cup. "I go where I'm needed." "Of course, though I wonder if your methods always serve the greater good." The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. "What methods?" Hayes smiled. "Accepting assistance from certain benefactors. It might give the impression that women physicians require masculine oversight." Clara's hands went still. "I work independently." "Do you?" Hayes glanced at Ezra. The look was quick but loaded with meaning, like she knew secrets that hadn't been spoken aloud. "Some colleagues worry that your approach might lower standards for all women in medicine." There it was. The real reason for the visit. The true source of the sabotage. Dr. Margaret Hayes didn't want Clara to fail because she was incompetent. She wanted Clara to fail because her success threatened the careful world Hayes had built for herself. A world where white women physicians were exceptional, where they proved their worth by being twice as good as men, where the inclusion of others might dilute their hard-won respect. Clara stood. "I think you should leave." "Of course. But consider what I've said." Hayes gathered her things with theatrical precision. At the door, she turned back. "The medical community is watching, Dr. Washington. We all want you to succeed, in the appropriate way." After she left, Clara and Ezra sat in silence. The fire crackled between them like a living thing. "She's been sabotaging your supplies." "Yes." "Documenting everything we do together." "Yes." Clara rubbed her temples. The headache that had been building for days now felt like a hammer behind her eyes. "She's not working alone." Ezra leaned forward. "What do you mean?" "The sabotage has been too systematic, too well-funded. She has a partner with money and local connections." They didn't have to wait long to discover who. The photograph appeared, 3 days later, pasted to the door of the general store, copied and distributed to every business in Millbrook. It showed Clara and Ezra in the moment after they had saved Emma Hutchins. Clara's hand resting on Ezra's arm, his fingers covering hers. Both of them exhausted but smiling, an innocent moment of shared relief. Twisted into something scandalous by the eye of the camera, the title underneath read, "Is this the future of American medicine?" By noon, copies had spread to 3 neighboring towns. By evening, riders were carrying them as far as Cheyenne. Clara found the first one nailed to the schoolhouse door. Her medical bag slipped from nerveless fingers. Glass bottles shattered on the wooden steps like breaking bones. Ezra appeared at her shoulder. His face went dark as a thundercloud when he saw the image. Hayes did this. Hayes and someone else. Someone with money for photography, for printing, for distribution. Clara picked up the broken glass from her medical supplies. Each piece reflected her face back in fragmented pieces. "I should leave town." "No." "Ezra, you don't understand what this means." But he did understand. The photograph wasn't just gossip. It was a weapon designed to destroy them both. Clara would lose her medical career. Ezra would lose his standing in the community. Worse, it put Clara in physical danger. Relationships like theirs had ended in blood before. That night, Clara packed her bags. The medical equipment would stay. The supplies would go to whatever doctor eventually replaced her. The connections she had built with families would fade like smoke. She was folding her traveling coat when Ezra knocked. "Don't run." "I'm not running, I'm surviving." He stepped into the room. His presence filled the space between the bed and the window. "We can fight this." "How? By pretending we don't care about each other?" The question hung between them like a bridge neither wanted to cross. "Do we care about each other?" Clara's hand stilled on the coat. 6 weeks of working together, of shared coffee and quiet conversations, of hands that touched while treating patients, of looks that lasted longer than they should. "Yes. Then we fight." He crossed the room in 3 steps. His hands cupped her face like she was something precious, something worth protecting. Their first kiss tasted of coffee and determination. Of 2 people choosing each other despite the consequences. When they broke apart, Clara's world had shifted on its axis. "This makes everything worse." "I know. They'll destroy us." "Maybe. Your ranch, my career, everything we've built." Ezra's thumb traced her cheek. "Then we'll build something new." Outside, horses thundered past the house. Voices called out in the darkness. The photograph was spreading like wildfire across the territory. But inside the small bedroom, Clara and Ezra held each other against the storm that was coming. The next morning brought worse news. Miguel Flores, Ezra's ranch foreman, found him at the barn. The man's face was gray with worry. "Patron, there's something you need to know." Miguel had worked for the Caldwell family for 20 years, had known 3 generations of secrets, had kept them all buried like treasures in the desert until now. "Your mother, Senora Elena, she wasn't just Spanish like your father told everyone." Ezra's hands went still on the horse's bridle. "She was Cherokee, from the nations in Oklahoma." The world tilted sideways. Everything Ezra thought he knew about himself cracked like ice in spring. "Your father sent her east to finishing school, taught her to speak like a white lady, to dress like one, to pass." Miguel's voice was gentle as falling rain. "She never forgot who she was, but she let people believe what they wanted to believe." Ezra sank onto a hay bale. His mixed heritage explained everything. The connection he felt to his Mexican workers, the understanding he had for Clara's position, the way he had always felt, caught between worlds. He wasn't a white man crossing racial boundaries. He was a mixed-race man who had been passing his entire life without knowing it. The revelation changed nothing about his feelings for Clara, but it changed everything about the battle they were about to fight. The pen trembled in Ezra's hand. February wind cut through the town square like a blade. 200 faces stared, back with the cold hunger of a lynch mob. Sheriff Morrison held the paper steady. The ultimatum was typed in careful letters. Sign over the Caldwell Ranch to the town council. Leave Wyoming territory forever. Take Clara with him, or watch her face charges that would put her in territorial prison. Clara stood beside him, her spine straight as a rifle barrel, her chin raised despite the hatred radiating from the crowd like heat from a forge. Josiah Maddox smiled from the courthouse steps. He had orchestrated this moment for months. The photographs, the legal maneuvering, the pressure on the town council, all to steal 10,000 acres of prime grazing land. Ezra's fingers closed around the pen. 6 months of investigation had led to this moment. 6 months of watching Clara document every crooked deal, every forged signature, every bribe that had changed hands in Laramie's back rooms. The ink touched paper. Then Clara's hand covered his. "Sheriff Morrison." Her voice carried across the square like a church bell, clear and uncompromising. "Before Mr. Caldwell signs anything, you might want to see these." She pulled a leather portfolio from her medical bag. Documents spilled out like fallen leaves. Land deeds, bank records, telegrams, with forged signatures. "Mr. Maddox has been stealing from all of you." The crowd shifted. Uncertainty rippled through their ranks like wind through wheat. "Dr. Hayes helped him document our relationship, but she also documented his illegal activities. Insurance, you might say." Maddox stepped forward. His face had gone pale as winter sky. "That's impossible." "Is it?" Clara held up a photograph, not the one that had been plastered across 3 counties. This one showed Maddox handing money to a territorial official. The date was clearly visible. Dr. Hayes kept detailed records, including this. Mayor Hutchins took the photograph. His hands shook as he studied the image. "This shows him bribing Judge Franklin. For favorable land rulings, Mr. Maddox has been stealing property throughout the territory. The Caldwell Ranch was just his biggest target." The crowd turned toward Maddox like a tide changing direction. Faces that had been twisted with hatred now showed something else entirely. Betrayal, rage, the fury of people who had been played for fools. Maddox backed toward his carriage. "You can't prove anything. I can prove everything." Clara opened the portfolio wider. More documents, more photographs, more evidence of corruption that reached into the territorial government itself. "Dr. Hayes documented it all. She may have wanted me gone, but she wanted insurance against her partner more." Sheriff Morrison studied the papers. His face grew darker with each page. "This changes things, Maddox." The crowd pressed closer, no longer interested in Clara and Ezra's relationship, focused entirely on the man who had been robbing them blind. Maddox reached his carriage. His driver was already turning the horses. "This isn't over." "Yes, it is." Ezra's voice carried quiet finality. the same tone he used when discussing cattle prices or weather. "You're done in Wyoming." The carriage disappeared in a cloud of dust. The crowd slowly dispersed. Crisis averted through evidence and patience rather than violence and chaos. Mayor Hutchins approached Clara and Ezra. His face was haggard, but grateful. "Thank you." Two words that carried the weight of a community's relief. 6 months later, Clara's medical practice occupied the entire first floor of the renovated hotel. Patients came from 50 miles in every direction, some for her skill, others from curiosity. All left impressed. Ezra's ranch thrived under ethical management. His workers earned fair wages. Their families received medical care. Their children attended the school he had built and expanded. Dr. Margaret Hayes had fled back east after her partnership with Maddox was exposed. The medical community there would have questions she might not want to answer. The wedding took place on a crisp October morning, not in the church which had refused them, but in the schoolhouse where Clara had treated her first patients. Families she had saved filled the benches. Workers from Ezra's ranch stood along the walls. Miguel Flores gave Clara away when her own family couldn't make the journey from Philadelphia. The ceremony was simple. The vows were heartfelt. The kiss was witnessed by people who had learned that love took many forms. As they walked down the aisle, a U.S. Marshal entered through the back door. His face was stern. His hand rested on official papers. The crowd went silent. Clara's grip tightened on Ezra's arm. They had survived Maddox, survived Dr. Hayes, survived the social pressure and legal challenges. But federal law was different. Federal law could reach anywhere. The marshal approached, slowly. His boots echoed in the sudden quiet. He stopped in front of Clara, drew the papers from his coat. "Dr. Clara Washington?" "Yes. By order of the Territorial Governor and the U.S. Department of the Interior, you are hereby appointed Chief Medical Officer of Wyoming Territory." The words fell like stones in still water. Clara stared at the papers. Official seals. Government. Letterhead. A salary that would make her one of the highest-paid doctors in the West. The position includes authority over all territorial medical facilities, including the new hospital being built in Cheyenne. Clara took the papers with hands that barely trembled. 6 months ago, she had been fighting for the right to practice medicine. Now she was being given authority over an entire territory's healthcare system. The crowd erupted in applause, not universal. Some faces remained disapproving, but enough had changed to make the celebration real. Later at the reception, children played in the schoolyard. The same children Clara had saved from diphtheria. Their laughter carried on the autumn wind like music. Ezra found Clara standing apart from the celebration. She was watching Emma Hutchins chase a butterfly through the prairie grass. Regrets? None. Think they'll ever fully accept us? Clara watched Emma's mother smile and wave from across the yard. The same woman who had once crossed the street to avoid passing Clara on the sidewalk. But acceptance wasn't what mattered anymore. Power was what mattered. Position was what mattered. The ability to heal was what mattered. "I don't need their acceptance anymore, Ezra." She turned to face him. Her wedding dress caught the afternoon light like captured sunshine. "I have their children's lives in my hands. And that is all to the story for now. Please let me know where you are tuning in from. Perhaps we will create a story there. Consider liking this video and subscribing to our channel. And if you enjoy our content, click this video on your screen. I promise you, it's worth watching. See you tomorrow.